Hi everyone, this is Samantha Varner from ProSymmetry. I hope you all are doing well today. Thank you so much for joining us on this timesheet configuration and end user presentation that we are going to give today. Matt Baker is going to be giving the presentation, as you all are probably familiar with him. But we're going to give everyone just about another minute or two to get on, and then we will go ahead and get started. So give us just a minute. All right, and we are going to go ahead and get started. So for those of you who just joined, thank you so much for joining. This is Samantha Varner from ProSymmetry. I have Matt Baker on as well, who will be facilitating today's conversation on timesheets. A few things before we get started. I do want to mention that timesheets is an addition to Tempus, so that is an additional license. If that's something, if you don't have it and it's something you are interested in, please let me know. We can get that conversation started here. A few other things. It looks like Matt is on version 5.1, which is our latest Tempus release. It just released this week. We're really excited for it. So please keep that in mind in case you notice that anything, you notice something that maybe you don't have access to in your current environment. It could be that reason. This is our last Tempus educational webinar for the next few weeks. We really enjoy doing these each week and we plan to continue to do them in the future. We think that it's so helpful. Thank you all for your feedback. But we will be reaching out here soon with some more topics and some more presentations. But for now, Matt, let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Samantha, and hello, everybody. Like Samantha was saying, I'm Matthew Baker, and I'll be kind of leading today's webinar. And today's topic is going to be kind of mostly revolving around timesheet configuration, as well as kind of the end user perspective and the approval process. So it will be broken up into those kind of couple sections. We'll start off with the timesheet configuration, all the different options you have available to you, how to configure your periods, as well as how to configure your users to utilize timesheets. And then after that, we'll be moving on to an end user perspective, submitting a timesheet, what they'll be seeing. And then lastly, on the approval side of things, what the timesheet approvers will see, how to approve individual as well as multiple timesheets simultaneously. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. And like Samantha was saying, I am on version 5.1. That's the most up-to-date version of Tempus that were released earlier this week. So if you're not on that version and you want to get a little bit more insight, have some questions, please feel free to reach out to Samantha. She can absolutely help you along the way and give you that information that you need. So I'm going to go ahead and start things off, and the first thing will be timesheet configuration. So this is a relatively fresh environment, so nothing really on the timesheeting side has been set up. So this is going to go from kind of start to finish, how to configure everything, and then how to get it running within your system. So to start things off, I'm going to go ahead and navigate here to admin settings. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we'll see timesheets. And these will be the two particular tiles you'll be working with when you're trying to set up timesheets within your system. The first tile we'll be working with is timesheet configuration. This is going to manage a lot of the configurable options that yourself as well as your users will see when working within timesheets. And then we also have timesheet period management. This is where you'll be managing the periods associated to those different time frames. So to start things off, I'm going to work with timesheet configuration here. And we're just going to go through some of the settings that you'll have available to you. And the first one is just week start. So this is going to be the start date of your given periods. So when you define them, it will automatically default to this. You can change this if needed within the screen to any day of the week, as well as you do have options to change it within the timesheet period management screen. So this won't be required or enforced, but it will help you kind of dictate and default to this particular week start option. Next option that we do have is your non-working days. So these are going to define the days for which users will not be able to enter in time for. So it is very important to set this up before you create your time periods, since those don't retroactively update based on what you provide. So if you are new to timesheets, you will want to set this up first. If you're not and you want to update them, you can do it for your ongoing periods, or you can recreate the periods you've already created. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to say my users won't be able to enter in time on the weekends. So we only anticipate them working through Monday and Friday. So I'll select Saturday as well as Sunday here. And this will make it so when I do create those periods, these two particular days will not be available for time entry. Next option we have is dominant units. So this will be between time and FTE, and it'll be mostly prevalent based on the unit that you most likely want to see within your system. I will say majority of cases, I see end users and other clients work with time. However, you do have the option to specify FTE if you want. Next, we have active units, and these are just going to define the units available on a user's timesheet. So by default, it's going to be set up the time, FTE, and FTE percentage. You do have the additional option to add man days if you're looking to have your end users enter in their time in man days, as well as you can always disable particular options if you want. So maybe you only want them entering in this information as time. You can go ahead and deselect FTE and FTE percentage. If you want those available to your end user, you can always re-enable them at any time. Okay, the next are just some additional options revolving around the timesheet and how the data will be represented or potentially saved back to the project. So the first one is just a saved approved allocation to project actuals. So what this option will do is will essentially whenever a timesheet has been gone through that approval process, has been approved, the actuals that have been, or the timesheet hours that have been saved to that timesheet will then be saved back directly into the project actuals. So it allows you to save that information back and then relatively easily compare it against the planned information that was initially assigned. Next, we have allow timesheet users to view their planned allocations. So if you are assigning planned allocation to your resources, and that's what's pre-populated on the timesheet, this will provide them with a toggleable option to allow them to view what you planned for them on their timesheet, so then your end users have kind of an idea of how much time they should be working on that given assignment. Next, we have a very similar option. This is just view timesheet approve or allow timesheet approver to view their planned actuals. So the same toggleable option that the end user would see would be on the approval screen for the, your timesheet approvers. So I'm going to go ahead and enable these. So later in the demonstration, we can see what that option looks like. And next we have allow timesheet users to see the period view. So when an end user opens up their timesheet, they'll have the option to view it at a daily level. So each individual day will be defined and they can provide their hours, as well as you can always select on this by period view if this is enabled, which will kind of roll up the entire period into one cell and provide it at a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, depending on how your periods are set up, and just have one cell representing all of that data. So if you want them to have this option to roll that up, you're going to want to make sure this is enabled. If not, then they'll have to kind of be enforced to enter this in at a daily level. And then the next option is relatively similar to that. It's just for the timesheet approver side of things. So for allow timesheet approver to see the period view, it's just going to allow the timesheet approver to roll up that information into that individual cell. Next, we have enforce timesheet at the project level. So this is going to enforce your users to enter their hours at a project level or within the generic task. So even if you do have some of your custom tasks defined within your projects, when it comes to the timesheeting, we'll enforce them to enter it in within that generic task and will not provide them the option to select or even view the customly defined tasks that you have in the system. Okay, so the next option is write weekend data into the work week. And this is gonna kind of coincide with the save approved allocations to project actuals. So one of the things within Tempus and how it's kind of architectured is it does not allow you to save actual or planned information within weekends. So Saturday and Sundays are not available days to provide allocation. However, on the timesheet side of things, we do allow you to enter in time on Saturday and Sunday. And there, this led to the issue of, well, if we save time on Saturday and Sunday, our actuals may not be saved back into those Saturday and Sunday just because it's not since we do not allow it. So what this write weekend data into the work week will do is it will essentially take the Saturday and Sunday time if it is available and you do allow for it, and essentially equally distribute it throughout the work week so you can at least account for some of those hours that were worked on those weekend values. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that. And then a couple more options we'll go over is first the auto open and close behavior. So your periods can either manually be opened or closed, or you can have it kind of on this automated process. So if you were to enable that, it'll allow you to specify the particular auto open criteria. So when should the period be open? Should it open on the day that the period starts, or anywhere up to 10 days before them, giving your end user a little bit more lead time to provide the actual allocation or their timesheet hours within there based on when the period opens itself. And then you can also specify an auto close time, so anywhere from 0 to 10 days after the period is closed, to give your users a little bit more leniency on when their timesheet needs to be submitted. Okay, next one we have project owner approval, and this is just a secondary approval process where if you're familiar with timesheets, it goes through a standard approval process, routing to the timesheet approver, and then they'll take action either approving or rejecting, and then kind of going from there. This allows for that secondary level approval, which once it's approved by the timesheet approver, it will then be routed to the project owners. Well, then they'll be able to take action upon those particular assignments as well. So this is going to be dictating if actual allocation will be saved back into the project. So if it is approved, then the actual allocation will be successfully written back, and then if it is rejected, it will not. Next, we have the self-service timesheet flag option, and this is something we'll be going over in just a little bit, but just to give you kind of the background of what this will do, it will allow you to, your end users, to essentially add assignments that they weren't initially assigned to in kind of an ad hoc fashion. So primarily, timesheets are dictated, and what you can assign hours to is dictated based off of what planned allocation a user is assigned to. This will kind of bypass that option, allowing you to pick and choose some of the assignments you want them to add. Very prevalent with administrative time, so PTO, vacation, holidays, something that you may not initially plan for, but you want them to be easily to be able to add this information into their timesheet without actually having to assign them. So we'll go over the configuration of that in just a little bit. But to kind of wrap things up with some of these additional options, and there's not too many more. First one is the generic task label, and this just allows you to redefine how generic is displayed, or the generic task is displayed within the timesheet. So whatever you specify here will be what is displayed on your end user's timesheet. Next, we have maximum and minimum hours per day and per timesheet. So if there's a maximum amount, a minimum, you can define them here, and this will be kind of organization-wide, so any timesheet user will kind of be defined by based on these options right here. And then lastly, a couple more mandatory notes for projects, so you can specify assignment level comments for each given on each timesheet. So if you do want to make those mandatory for any of the projects, you can specify those here. You have options to auto approve your resources, so it's going to be based off of all the timesheet users in your system. And if you want to make it so their timesheets get automatically approved and don't have to go through that approval process, you can always select them within here. And then if you want all of them to be auto approved, you can always select on this option to select all. Okay, next option is allow assignment requests for projects. So this is a newer functionality that will allow your end users to request planned allocation for particular projects. So it's going to be based off the projects you specify here, as well as there'll be some additional configuration, making sure they're on the team of that project, as well as making sure they have a resource manager. Okay, lastly, we have a couple more options just going around some of the views. First one is available timesheet views. So there will be 3 views available to you: the by period view, the consolidated view, and all timesheets view. So if you don't want your users to have access to a particular view, you can go ahead and deselect it. So if you only want them to see the by period view, you can always go ahead and deselect those. If you want access to all, you can reselect them. It is really personal preference on what you want your end users to see. And then you have the default view, which has to be by period, consolidated view, or all timesheets, and the view will have to be enabled for you to select that option. Then the last option that we have here is a heat map threshold. So this is going to come into play when viewing the timesheet audit report within the system. So it's just going to provide a threshold based on the hours that they entered. So the lower threshold is going to be anything that is less than 40 in this case, and it's going to be dictated by the center value. So say we wanted this to 50. So now anything less than 50 is going to be displayed as red. Anything from 50, and let me change this upper value to maybe be 60. And in this case, anything from 50 to 60 is going to display green, and then anything that is above 60 is going to display as yellow. Okay, so that covers the timesheet configuration tab. Lastly, to save any of the configuration that you just, or updates that you just made, you're just gonna go ahead up here, hit save, and that will save that configuration. And something went wrong here. So let me go ahead and just refresh this. And let me just save this, and there we go. Okay, so once your configuration is saved, the next step is to create your timesheet periods, and these are going to define kind of the timesheets for your end users within the system. So right now I don't have any created, so let's go ahead and create one. Very straightforward, very easy to do. First thing you want to do is just hit this plus icon, and then from here it's going to default on that week start date, so that's Sunday that we specified on the given week. And then you can always go ahead and change that. So if you want to change it to a new start date, you can select on the particular date. So we can go ahead and select a couple of those. And let's say I want to start my time periods from June 7th, 2020. Next, you can specify the amount of days that is available in a period. So by default, it's going to be 7. But let's say maybe you go kind of 2-week periods. You can always expand that out to 14 days. If you want to do it every month, you can always go here. And let's say we want this to end on the 30th. You can define it at a monthly level. So you do have many options on how the period should be defined. For this demonstration, I'm just going to stick with a 6-day or a 7-day period starting on the 7th. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create multiple periods by increasing this period count. So I'm going to go out until maybe the beginning of August. The last thing that is important to note is the naming convention when you're creating multiple periods will be based off what you have defined up above. So right now it's just week 1. You can change this to any naming convention that you want. However, I'm going to stick with week 1, and what you'll see is it will increment those periods with a number based on how many periods you specified. So in this case, I have week 1 here. This is going to increment up to week 8 since I have 8 periods defined. So I'm going to go ahead and add periods here. And then you can see we have week 1 through week 8, as well as we can see the time frames that they're represented in. So working with this view is pretty straightforward as well. If you do need to change the period name, you can go ahead and do so by selecting on the edit icon and changing the name. The date range, and I'll just name this week 1. There we go. Date range, you won't be able to change, but it's just showing the start and end date of the given time periods. Consolidated view, which I'll enable here, will allow you to view this information within the consolidated view if you are utilizing that. So I'll go ahead and enable that for all of my time periods. And then lastly, you also have the status. So if it's open, closed, or partially open. So I'm going to go ahead and open all these periods. However, if you do have that automatic or auto open and close behavior, you won't really have to manage a status since you'll be kind of using that workflow to open and close them. And then one last thing I want to mention is if you do close your period, you do have this option for exclusive access. So let's say, for example, the period's closed, but one of your end users forgot to submit a timesheet during that time. You can always use this exclusive access option to choose particular resources that the period will be open for. So let's say, in this case, TS1 right here forgot to submit their timesheet. We need to reopen it, but we don't want to open it up to everybody. You can go ahead and just open it for this TS1 resource and hit save. and essentially only TS1 will be able to update that period or update their timesheet during that period. So I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to open this up once more so it's open to everybody. And that's it. So once we have our period set up, we're almost there on the configuration side of things. So we've gone through the configuration options. We made sure everything looks good and have our periods defined appropriately. The last step will be just setting up your resources so they can actually go ahead and submit timesheets. And the first step within there will be to set up your timesheet approvers. So if we go here to resource management, I'm going to set up my administrator account as a timesheet approver. Very straightforward. All you have to do is either select on the name and find this is timesheet approver field and set this to yes, and go ahead and hit save. So you'll want to make sure that all your timesheet approvers, anyone who should be approving a timesheet, has that field set to yes. This will allow them to be set up as a timesheet approver, so then you can start that workflow. To set up your timesheet users, there'll be 2 different fields that you have to set up. The first one is the timesheet approver. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and open up timesheet user. And if we go down to the bottom, we will see we have this timesheet approver option. And this list is going to be dictated based off of all the resources in your system that have that is timesheet approver field set to yes. So right now for me, it's only administrator. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up. And then lastly, underneath user identity, there will be an is timesheet user flag. So if you go ahead and enable that and hit save, that will allow them to enter in time within a timesheet. So it is important to note that the primary method for timesheets to be submitted is going to be based off of their planned allocation. So if I open up timesheet user once more, and I go over here to capacity, you will see that I have some time, and granted it's way too much time here, but you can see that we have time assigned to this Bender Phase 1 project, Cheerio Phase 2, as well as Python Phase 10. So those are the anticipated projects that I'm going to be looking for when I open up my timesheet. So I'm going to go back here, and I'll head to project management just to see some of those hours within here. So I'll open up Cheerio Phase 2 and go to allocation. I'm going to check this out, and I'm just going to revise these hours real fast. Let's just say 100 hours here. Let's say 50, 50, and just copy these hours over. So we can see that this timesheet user does have some planned allocation, which should flow through into the timesheets themselves. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and open up another tab using the same environment just so I can log in as this timesheet user. Go ahead and hit login, and it looks like, there we go. We go ahead and log in, and this will be the screen that your timesheet users see. If they have greater permissions set up, then they will see those additional tiles, but if they have nothing really set up and they're just in the system for timesheets, this is the screen that they'll most likely see, only seeing the tile for my timesheets. So if you are a timesheet user, you can navigate to the screen and it will open up to the most up-to-date period within here. So it's going to be based off of today's date, so we can see the time period for June 4th or June 14th to June 20th being displayed, as well as we can see all the different options down below based on the planned allocation that was assigned. Working within here is relatively easy. Based on the assignments given, you can specify the particular hours. So let's say on Bender Phase 1, worked 4 hours each day. You can specify those hours. We'll also see the project name Cheerio Phase 2, as well as the assignment or the particular task that they're assigned to down below. And we can enter in, let's say 2 hours here. And then we can also enter in hours for the last task they were assigned to. Let's say 4 hours, 4 hours. So there are a lot of different options within here. First one is just the units of measure you have to work with. So you can see by default, it's going to be time in my scenario, but you can go between FTE as well as FTE percentage, as well as you have options to change it to that by period view. So it'll kind of give you a roll up of all the hours you submitted, as well as you can always provide hours in here. So let's say I worked 30 hours this week. that'll essentially take that 30 hours and equally distribute it throughout each given day available to you. You have options to view the planned allocation. So we can see that we have the planned allocation that was initially planned for me up above, and you can see what those are and easily compare it to what you were expected to work. As well as you have the option to show totals, which is just going to give you a total column on the left-hand side of the screen, showing you how many hours you've actually submitted on that given period. Besides that, you do have options to add additional timesheets in two different ways. First one's going to be an overall timesheet level. So we can go ahead and say comment 1 right here and provide a comment for the overall timesheet, or let's say worked time on, or worked additional time on Tuesday, 16 June. You can enter an overall comment, as well as you have additional options to enter in comments at each assignment level. So you will see within each assignment, there's this little comment box. And if you select on that, you can go ahead and provide a comment within here associated to this given assignment. Okay, so once you've gone ahead and you've filled out your timesheet, you'll have options to either A, save the timesheet. What this will do is just save it as a draft. It hasn't been routed to the timesheet approver yet. Very good if they go in there every day and they want to just enter in their hours, save it, and then kind of go through the same process until all their hours have been filled out and is ready to submit. So if you do save it, you will see that it does go into this draft state. And then lastly, you also have the option to submit your timesheet. This will actually route it to the timesheet approver, where then the approver will be able to either A, approve it or reject it based on the hours provided. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And it will just give you a confirmation message letting you know that it's going to be submitted to the timesheet approver. And once it's in that submitted state, you won't be able to make further edits to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit yes, and there we go. So now the timesheet approver will have kind of a icon displayed on their homepage letting them know that they have a pending timesheet. And I do want to say that if you do submit your timesheet as an end user and you do notice a mistake before it's kind of gone through that process, you will have the option to retract it. By doing so, it'll allow you to make some of those further edits. So then let's say, oh, I actually worked 2 hours here on this Cheerio Phase 2 project on Friday, Wednesday, and Monday. You can make those updates and then resubmit it going through that process once more. Okay, a couple more features and options that you have within here I want to go over before we go to the approval side of things is first are these different options up here in the top. So you have the by period view, which is the default view set within the system. However, you can view this as in a consolidated view. This is just going to provide you options to kind of see that period level, see the dates of those different periods and when they span, and kind of enter your time in a single screen, so you don't have to continuously go back and forth between different time periods. You also have the option to view the all timesheets view, which is just going to show you all the time periods within the system, what the status of them are, if you've submitted your timesheet or not, as well as the overall hours that have been submitted. You can navigate to any of your periods from within the screen. So I'm going to navigate to this week 3 to kind of round out the last option that I wanted to go over, which is this copy prior period. So let's say you've been working on very similar tasks for the last couple weeks and you're working very similar amount of hours. You can very easily just select on this copy prior period, which will just copy the same hours that were written within the previous period. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to back out here, and then I'm going to navigate back to my administrator account, who is the timesheet approver of this resource. Go ahead, refresh it, and now we can see within timesheet management, we do see this kind of one icon showing that there's one pending timesheet that needs action to be taken. So as a timesheet approver, you'll want to go here and select on your timesheet management tile. And from here, you'll see all the timesheets that are currently in that kind of submitted status. So you have a couple different options to view this information. First is by period. So up here at the top, we can see the particular period, and then you'll see all the timesheets that fall under that period. You can also change this to by resource, which will then just show you kind of a view of the resource name at the top, and then all the timesheets that they have submitted and have not been either approved or rejected yet. So to approve a timesheet or reject it, you can do it individually by selecting on the option right here. And then down below, you'll be able to see all of the given hours that they've entered. You can see the comments up above that they provided, as well as if there are any assignment comments provided, you'll see that same comment box right here. You can always click on it to view what they wrote. Like we saw on the previous screen, you have options to view this in time, FTE, as well as FTE percentage based on your configuration, as well as we have options to see the planned allocation, view it by period, as well as show a totals column, all based on your configuration as well. So once you've gone through and you reviewed the given hours that have been submitted, you can either approve or reject it. Approving it will essentially archive the given timesheet, and then as well as if you have the configuration set up and enabled, it will save those hours back to the actuals within the project, as well as you can reject it, which will essentially route the timesheet back to the timesheet user, and then you can provide a comment letting them know what needs to be changed, and so they'll have to go through it and resubmit the timesheet and go through that process once more. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to provide a comment. Looks good. Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and approve the timesheet. And once you do so, essentially the timesheet will be approved and archived. Those hours should be displayed within the actual allocation of the project as well. If you ever need to go back through the process and let's say you approved the timesheet, but something was wrong and you need to reject it after it has been approved, you can do so by going to this archive tab in the top right. So within here, you're going to be navigated to all your archive timesheets. This will be broken up by the individual users. So right here, we can see a list of all the users that are my timesheet users. You can always navigate through the different ones based on what they've submitted. I'm going to work with the timesheet user, and we can always go ahead and open this up once more. We can see this has been archived. However, you do have the option to recall it, essentially rejecting the timesheet, so it has to go through that process once more. All you have to do so is first provide a comment. Made a mistake. Please look at the hours provided. And you can go ahead and hit recall, and that will essentially reject the timesheet, and you'll have to go through that process once more. Okay. So that being said, there is one more additional option I do want to cover before we kind of open up to a Q&A, and that is that self-service timesheet option that we kind of glanced over earlier. So this is something I've seen a lot of clients use, and it allows you to kind of add assignments onto your timesheet without actually being assigned any planned allocation to them. So to go ahead and set that up, the first thing you'll have to do is create an attribute that will be dictating kind of that self-service flag. So this will have to be a project attribute of the type of Boolean. So I'm going to head here to attribute management. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to name it self-service timesheet flag. Want to make sure that we're on this project option right here, as well as we're going to want to make sure it's the type of bool. And we're going to go ahead and hit create. So Boolean will be that yes or no value, and that is what we're looking for when setting up this self-service flag. And then the next step that we'll need to do is set it up on the timesheet configuration side. So right down below, we can see self-service timesheet flag. We can go ahead and select on self-service timesheet flag down below. So this list is only project Boolean fields. So you won't have a whole list of your attributes, only those Boolean values. I'm going to go ahead and hit save up here. Perfect. So once we have that set up, we can then go on the project side of things and start setting up for some of our users. So the first step to do so is to navigate the project management. And I'm going to go ahead and work with this admin time project. So the first step is to make sure that that self-service flag is set to yes for that project. So I'm going to go up here and choose values, and I'm going to look for that self-service timesheet flag, add it to the view, and I'm just going to go ahead and set this value to yes. Perfect. So once that is set up, the next step and the final step will be to assign the users that you want to have access to this project to the team. So I'm going to go here up in the top right-hand corner and select on Build Team. And as you can see, I don't really have a team built out, but I'm going to look for that timesheet user that I was signed into earlier and add it to the team. So I'll select on timesheet user, select add the team, which will display the name over here on the right. And then lastly, I'm going to go ahead and hit save to persist those changes. So now what we're going to see is over the time period of 1/1/2020 and 12/31/2022, where the project is defined, I should be able to add any of the tasks down below associated to this project to my timesheet based on that self-service capability. So I'm going to navigate once more back to my timesheet user account and open up my timesheets. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to resubmit this, but I'm going to go back to a new period, delete this particular draft. So we'll still see those pre-populated tasks that we were working on. So all my planned allocation options are still available down below. However, we will see that this add assignment option is now highlighted blue. Once I do so, we will see all those tasks that were defined within that project based on that self-service capability. So let's say, for example, I had to take a PTO day at the end of the week. You can go ahead and add that relatively easily and hit 8 hours here and then fill out that timesheet as expected. And I'll just go ahead and submit that. Okay, so you aren't really restricted on how many projects that will fit within that add assignment option or the self-service capabilities. You can add multiple resources onto the team, make sure it's populating for them. You can add multiple projects to allow for that option as well, especially if you're going for more of that ad hoc, not really enforcing the planned allocation, but they do need to have options to pick and choose whatever projects they worked on that given week. Okay, so that being said, that concludes the information and topics that we'll be covering today. One more thing I did want to mention, which I forgot about, is I do want to go over some of the reporting options available to you within timesheets, and these will be relatively quick. So there are 2 out-of-the-box timesheet reports within here, the timesheet status report as well as timesheet audit report. If we go ahead and click on the timesheet status report, it'll just give you a list of all the timesheet users within your system, as well as show you the statuses of some of their timesheets. So we can see that timesheet user right here we've been working with has those 2 submitted timesheets, as well as all the rest haven't been worked on yet. So it's a very easy and good way to be able to identify some of the timesheets that have not been maybe submitted yet, or maybe are still in that submitted and need approval. So it provides you with a lot of options within here to get some visibility on where those timesheets kind of fall. And then lastly, we also have this timesheet audit report. And this is going to provide you how many hours were submitted on that given timesheet. We can also apply that heat map threshold that we set up within the timesheet configuration to kind of view where they kind of fall. And this is going to be based off of any status of timesheet within here. So if it's a draft, submitted, archived, retracted, any of those different statuses, those hours will still be populated within here. And then lastly, you do have, if those 2 reports are enough for you and you want to customize the report a little bit more, you do have options within Pivot Grid. So you will see your timesheet period as well as timesheet dimension options down below, which you can add into the report, as well as you have your timesheet data set options down below to interact with the data entered directly through your timesheets. So you will have many different reporting options to work with when using your timesheet data and creating some of those reports. Okay, so that concludes today's webinar on some of the topics of timesheet configuration, approval, and submission. I'm going to take a second here and see if there's any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Matt. So you may have just mentioned this, but I did want to bring it up just in case. Are you able to report on timesheet comments? Is that a functionality that we have brought to Tempus?
So at the moment, you won't be able to report off of the comments that have been saved into the timesheet. That will be kind of restricted to the end user as well as the timesheet approver and what they can see and cannot see. I do believe it is functionality that we look to add in the future. It's just not available at this time.
Right. Okay. It doesn't look like we have any other questions at this time. If someone realizes, later that they have questions, please, please, please reach out to me and we can definitely go ahead and get those answered. One thing I did want to mention, I know I mentioned this at the top of the webinar, we don't have any future educational webinars scheduled just yet. We will probably after the United States holiday of the 4th of July. We'll probably get some more on the calendar, so be on the lookout for that. But we do have our Tempus Resource user virtual conference coming up next week, June 24th from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. I did put the link to the conference so that way you could register, get more information and decide if you want to register for it right now. So pretty much this conference, we are covering all aspects of resource management. We have some thought leaders and industry leaders who will be presenting during the day. We have some current users of Tempus going through their resource management and the specific areas that they use Tempus for, really just trying to bring everyone together here to provide more insight on how Tempus is used across the board. So we're really excited to bring this to you. Even if you cannot attend, we totally understand 6 hours to dedicate during a day is a very long time. Feel free to register still. You will receive a link to a recording of the entire conference, which could be a great resource to have in the future. So feel free to register still. We totally expect people to jump on and jump off. So we would love to have you there. And if there are no other questions, I think we can close it out for the day. Thank you so much, Matt, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks, everyone.